Good day to you all. My name's Terence Baker. I'm news editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and you are listening to the CoStar News Hotels Europe, Middle East and Africa podcast, The Upgrade. We are actually live from the Hotel Data Conference in Nashville. Once a year, over we come for a week or 3 days of data about the hotel industry. And we are here live doing this podcast at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Nashville. Wonderful, wonderful place to come. I'm here with William Anns, analyst at STR. Welcome, William. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here in Nashville. I had a session yesterday on US forecast assumptions. It's great to be talking back about Europe again.
It was an excellent session. And yes, you're right. We're going to be talking about Europe on this podcast, not the USA. So, as I say, 3 days of data in Nashville. It's the 11th time I've been here. Actually, maybe a 12th. Maybe I came through on a road trip many, many years ago. And Nashville's absolutely fantastic place. It's buzzing. We're seeing new hotels being built here all the time. I heard Mandarin Oriental's coming in, St. Regis, Equinox. It's just a great place to be. It's your second time here, William?
My second Hotel Data Conference. I was here slightly earlier in the year in April, so I got to see the new US office then. Love it as always. Great vibe, great buzz around the place, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to come back.
Well, yes, excellent, and it's great to be here with you. Our offices here in the US used to be in Hendersonville, not too far up the road, but now they're fully in downtown Nashville, and I saw the offices too. They're fantastic. Anyway, let's get cracking on. This podcast is going to be about Europe, as I said. We're going to be talking about the European markets. We're going to be talking about US inbound into Europe, what we're seeing there. And then we're going to talk about a couple of big events that have happened in Europe in the last few months. We had the Women's Euros soccer tournament, football tournament, I should say. I'm probably addressing mostly a European crowd. And I actually have on my little sheet here, officially the UEFA Women's Championship 2025 has just ended with England. And I didn't put anything after that because I was writing this before we actually won it all. So our Lionesses, we're very proud of it in England for winning that trophy. Anyway, let's get onto European markets, William. Give me a sense of what cities are performing well in Europe this year. I mean, who's doing well, why, what segmentation is doing well?
Yeah, no, of course. So in particular, the south of Europe is doing quite well. We've seen kind of more tricky headwinds, particularly in the UK. But if I just talk a little bit about Madrid, it's been doing really well. Particularly this year, performance is up around 7% in terms of RevPAR. And nearly all of that has been driven by ADR, around 6.5% of that. And Madrid in particular is doing a really good job of attracting more tourists, more international demand as well, particularly from the US. We've heard that there's more capacity coming over to the airport from the US. And looking forward to their calendar as well. There's a really good set of attractions and events taking place. Obviously, there's the hopeful F1 taking place from 2026. And they're really doing a good job to renovate the rest of the city. We hear anecdotally quite a lot of hotel conversions are taking place and they're being upgraded into high-end properties. So it's definitely a spot that's got comeback post-COVID and now is very much competing for demand with Barcelona.
We had some sessions yesterday about outbound Europeans coming to the US, and I was on stage saying, well, maybe not this year to a degree, because we have choices in Europe, and never bet against the sun, as they say. And Spain is it's probably been the star market of Europe over the last maybe half a decade, if not a decade. It's still going to go Costa del Sol, Barcelona, Valencia even. You still see these cities going to be doing well in the foreseeable future.
Oh, for sure. And obviously we hear things in the news at the moment about the kind of unsettlement with short-term rentals in places like Barcelona. But the demand very much is there. And although the picture might seem slightly different, ADR growth in Barcelona is slightly up year over year. And that the declines in occupancy are actually mainly attributable to the fact that supply has grown in the market as well. So as much as what we may hear in the news, the reality is Spain is still a really attractive destination, both for business and for leisure.
We Europeans, mainland Europeans, require a visa or a little electronic payment now to get to the UK. we have to pay that next year, don't we? Or I mean, but that's basically a tax. No one cares, really. I mean, it's annoying, but it's just you suck it in, you carry on.
Yeah, for places that you fly to, I think it will be considered very easy. The slight trepidation, I think, is on just those people that cross via the Channel Tunnel, how that will be implemented. But for us, in terms of hotels, things are looking okay. It doesn't look like the demand will change as a result.
And what markets might have a little bit of headwind next year? We hear of Amsterdam, maybe a rate increase due to some taxes there. I mean, a lot of places in Europe are thinking about imposing hotel taxes. Even Suffolk Borough in London, where we work. Is that a problem, and what other markets in Europe might be bracing for some headwinds this year or next year?
Yeah, so sure. So Amsterdam is the main location really that a lot of European hoteliers are focusing on for next year. The proposed introduction of the VAT rate that will increase from 9 to 21% hasn't yet been confirmed, but many people in the market are treating it as good as confirmed. And resultingly, hoteliers are already potentially reducing their rates or changing about how they might confirm business groups for next year, just in order to provide some certainty about what they may look like, but they do not expect to perform as well next year as they do this year. In other places as well, we hear places like Edinburgh will start to introduce their tourist tax as well into the city, and that will be worked off a percentage basis of how much it's going to cost for the room. And that kind of sentiment can change where people choose to stay a little bit. We often will think those ideas are short term, but it's becoming more popular. And I think, as you said, places in the UK are starting to pick on the fact that's a way of increasing revenue. So I do think there are some small headwinds coming up in terms of where people feel like, it's where people feel like it's a good value to go to. But in majority of outside of the UK and Germany faces some difficult times as well. I think this year into next year, with the offsetting of the Euros, particularly in June and July of last year, they've struggled to kind of regain that business. But very much of Germany, once the trade fairs and the big events come back, the performance in many of those cities likely increases with it as well.
Well, Germany, of course, is a every other year market, isn't it, for a lot of places? And at rate in Amsterdam going up from 9 to 21, that's a big hit. I mean, I know in the UK our value add VAT is 20% anyway, and we've long complained that we're not competitive with other markets because of that. Is that just everyone needs some money coming in, I guess?
I think it is a result of looking at budgets and seeing which way you can increase tax revenue. Obviously, that 9% is reduced, and so in theory, it's always up for review to be brought up to what is their standard 21%. And unfortunately, it's the accommodation sector that's now had the attention turned on it. And it seems like it's time, although there was proposed initial taxes on other areas as well. Some of them have been scrapped. The accommodation one from 9 to 21% still looks to be going ahead, unfortunately.
Yes, indeed. We talked at the Hotel Data Conference about geopolitical tensions and where people are going inbound, outbound. London long needed the luxury traveller. And most places in Europe, I imagine, you go to Lake Como or Venice or any of the major tourism cities in the world, American travellers staying at luxury hotels really underpins the whole market. Do you see in this geopolitical noise that's going to suffer any, or is there? I mean, we don't like to think. We always think Americans have more money than we do, and they're going to come over. But is that true?
I think when we look at some of the arrivals data from the beginning of the year, we can kind of see that there's an increase in terms of actual arrivals from the US into London versus the year prior. But the idea that we've been playing with and the reality, I think, now that it starts taking to hold, is that those trips were likely booked before this increased amount of economic uncertainty took hold. And the subsequent changes in FX rate that now mean it's much more expensive for those American travelers. I think we heard Jan yesterday mention the fact that it now costs 10% more for a US traveller to stay in Europe.
So you're saying 2026 is when we might see some suffering there?
It could be the end of this year and into 2026 as well.
Already? Okay.
Already. If we work on that sort of 6 to 9 month booking window for those flights, particularly for business, maybe around that area as well, we have started to see a bit of a turning point, and looking at data from June, there is now year-over-year declines of inbound arrivals from the US into London.
Yeah, because I rather think the geopolitical noise around tariffs or are you welcome or are you not welcome, we move on. The news cycle comes in fast and we move on to the next subject. People said here at the data conference that maybe Canada feels a little bit more affronted by what's going on. Big brother, little brother, that kind of thing. Brits probably don't care. They're probably still going to come here to the US a little less. I think they're going to go to the hot spots in Europe. But you don't necessarily think that Europeans are going to travel to US a bit less, or
Well, in theory, in terms of on the foreign exchange piece, it would become cheaper for them to come to the US. But I think the sentiment that has changed in the last 6 months or so is true and will reflect travel, at least into the short-term future. I think things such as the World Cup and the Olympics could provide a much needed boost and could kind of turn these things around. But currently the news headlines kind of making people feel a little bit uncomfortable about traveling to certain places. I think sometimes, as you said, it's the news and we can sometimes overthink what's the reality of what's happening. But I do think there's a short-term impact.
my argument was that it's more the disposable income we have, and where we choose to spend it all, we may not be able to choose. It may go on housing, heating, which. But I heard this morning there was a speaker here at Hotel Data Conference from the Federal Reserve, and he was saying about the percentage of wages that go into mortgages, or the amount that it costs you now as a percentage of what you earn a year. And so, Americans are feeling some of that pressure too. So it's not just moaning about our own state of affairs. Everyone's in this together, but I think perhaps there's a higher level of high net worth individuals in the US who still want to travel to Europe. Let's hope that continues, because we need them and they're very welcome. Let's talk about a couple of big events we've had in Europe this year. As I said, the first one was the Women's Football Championships, where England, I think I worked it out, we played for about 330 minutes in the knockout rounds of that group, of that competition, and we were only ahead for 4.5 minutes in all three games.
Yes.
But Chloe Kelly and the Lionesses, they came through for us, and we beat the world champions Spain in the final. We're very, very proud of them. What are the hotel performance highlights from that? Do you have any statistics? I mean, it was in Switzerland, wasn't it?
It was, and the final was in Basel. And I think what's interesting here is the stadium capacity was around 39,000, and the hotel supply of that area is significantly less than that. And so what happened was, resultingly, the occupancy for the night of the final was around 93%, an increase of 79% year over year. And the ADR was up 111%, up to 271 Swiss francs.
Whoa.
So for a small city like that, it's a considerable boost. And then there is obviously the resulting RevPAR sitting around 250 Swiss francs.
And this is maybe, I'm not sure how many Americans are paying attention, but it's a run-up to the FIFA Men's World Cup here next year. There's a lot of excitement in the Hotel Data Conference about that. It's going to be in Canada, Mexico, and the US. Most games are going to be in the US. And most of the games, I think, are going to be in the big cities, New York, I think Atlanta, Chicago, etc. And I said to people, let's hope that Team USA get to at least the quarterfinals, because you want your home team of a competition to be near the end, to create that buzz, because our American friends have a lot of other sports they can concentrate on immediately after the US loses. But that's always the plan. And you also want the big teams around the world to do well. The Brazils, the Germanys, and the England. We want England to do very well. What numbers are you seeing around that World Cup now? Are you getting any kind of forward business on the books data?
Yes, it's a little bit further ahead for us than our forward start occupancy on the books. But what we kind of anticipate is, obviously in the months like June, July, when it's set to take place, we're putting a little bit higher of impact expectations on the top end of the market. We see people who have been traveling internationally long haul potentially more likely to stay that higher end in terms of the impact. Obviously, there are some potential headwinds if kind of things change in terms of visas and sentiment going forward. But really, as much as you said, the impact is kind of going to be dependent on where those teams are, what places they come to, the cities and the locations they are, so that the traveling supporters then know where to stay. So I think for us, it's one of those things where there could be even greater impact, especially once you start getting to the quarters and semi-finals. No matter who's playing, there's obviously a constant buzz around them, and that will increasingly increase the performance of that market. But in the earlier stages, in the knockout stages, I think it's going to be interesting to see what teams are set to play where.
I mean, we don't always know that because obviously for people who don't understand how this is done, there's usually, I think, 32 teams this year. They've expanded it, haven't they? But usually you have 8 in each basket. And of course, the top seeds are in those different baskets. But you still don't know where Germany's going to play. Someone mentioned yesterday, let's hope they play in Chicago. It has a big German population. Yeah. But you don't know that. And if they do get selected for Chicago, or say Argentina gets selected for Miami, you could think that's a bit suspicious, wouldn't you? You know, it's somehow someone's been tampering with those balls in a hat. But obviously you don't know where you're going to be in the group stage, where you end up in the table, first or second. That determines where you go for the next game. It determines your whole route to a final if you're so lucky. So as all ambiguity and uncertainty, we have enough uncertainty at the moment. So hoteliers can't actually really plan. I mean, obviously I know the dates. You can plan your ADR accordingly, but that will change if the English come into your town or the Germans, rather than say Equatorial Guinea, who just had an amazing tournament for the first time ever. I mean, we don't even know. Are they in it? Probably not. But you know what I mean. So it's hard to predict.
100%. Yes, it is something we're obviously going to be paying more attention to, and I'm sure for the next round of forecasting, there's going to be a little bit more kind of analysis into what we really expect those different market performances to be like.
In 1994, I just moved to the United States. I'd been there a year, and that was when the United States last held the World Cup. But I went to a semi-final, and I got tickets for about $25 right outside the stadium in a car park from someone who had tickets, because no one expected Bulgaria to have beaten Germany in the quarterfinals. So suddenly there were 50,000 disgruntled Germans trying to get the first plane back to Munich. And there's only about 5 Bulgarians in America, probably more, but it's not the demand. And suddenly there was a flood of tickets on the market, or you could have had a half full stadium. It's never good for football. So let's hope. Well, I never hope Germany progress, but there you go. That's another matter. They have big rivals in England, of course. Also this year, music events. We had Oasis perform around the United Kingdom. First time they played for something like 16 years. The Gallagher brothers are supposedly friendly again. They put all their issues behind them, at least till the end of the tour. They're coming to the States, I believe. What have those numbers done? I mean, it's very interesting to compare it with the Taylor Swift tours. Tell me what you're seeing.
Yeah, so if we can do a direct comparison actually in Cardiff, and the rates achieved during Taylor Swift's Eras tour last year was around £262 during that night. But this year, when Oasis took stage, they reached £326. So around a £64 higher ADR just 1 year later.
We're talking probably an older crowd.
Yep.
We're talking nostalgia. We're talking that kind of FOMO thing. Taylor Swift, you assume is going to come back to Britain at some point. That all played into it, presumably.
100%. I think that's for sure. And I think there's some interesting external data on tracking the number of pints that are sold at a Taylor Swift concert compared to a Coldplay concert. And I think that kind of gives you an idea of the demographic shift that will be turning up for those Oasis concerts. I mean, we're talking about, Taylor Swift actually had an ever so slightly higher occupancy when she was in Cardiff, 96%, as opposed to 91% when Oasis this year. But those rates are still up 170% year over year, which is interesting. And as we know, there wasn't just kind of Oasis as well. There was the events that kind of back to the beginning in Birmingham as well, where rates rose 100%, occupancy up 15%. And then as we move further into Oasis's calendar, switching back to them, the Manchester obviously taking place in Heaton Park, a little bit further north of the city. Rates were up over the overall period of those concert dates, 61% year over year. So a little bit more manageable. And I would say that the rates that they were achieved there are around 159 as opposed to 300, a bit more stomachable.
I saw some data from Barclays Bank saying the Taylor Swift shows in United Kingdom grossed £997 million on tickets, on hotels, on paraphernalia, 1.35 billion in dollars. I think a few less shows she did than Oasis did. Oasis, according to Barclays, said they made 1.6 billion pounds.
Wow.
So a little bit more. More shows. Average ticket price 171 pounds, but you know this overall spend is through the roof. A lot of people extremely excited by that. Next year, do we have any big shows? I mean, here, I guess, isn't it? World Cup and the Olympics coming up. So United Kingdom probably.
I'm sure there's always, artists that like to announce tours, especially as it gets close to that winter time, giving people something to look forward to for the following year. Nothing specifically comes to mind at the moment. I mean, I think people like Lady Gaga having tours in places like the O2. I think people would maybe hope and expect that would take place in arenas. I think there's always scope for big artists to kind of pick up those spots. I know that obviously in places like Dublin, they tend to obviously have a good events calendar, and they'll be very much keen to kind of get events back. Also, things like the American football games that take place outside of the US, they're very much on the cards this year. I think the one's taking place in Berlin. Expectations for that are going to be great. It did really well when it was in Munich, and I think that crowd there that also takes place in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London as well is a great opportunity that people seem to be consistently coming back for.
In the data, it's kind of hidden, isn't it? Because London's London and occupancy is always high. It's just one event for another, or leisure travel will take those places that the American football fans are coming. But yes, I mean, it's an ongoing trend. The National Football League here will not do that unless it was profitable and in their interest, so we can expect more of that to come over the years. Give me a sense, just as we end, just what your sentiment is for Europe in general over next year.
Sure. I mean, I think I would kind of split the outlook in between three sort of levels of Europe. If we look at the Northern Europe, really focusing on the UK there, I think the current trends that we're seeing in America and the bifurcation that's taken place is prevalent in the UK. I think it's set to continue, and there's some headwinds as to some growth there. In the rest of Europe, kind of maybe places like France are set to do quite well, bouncing back from the Olympics. But really it's Southern Europe, in particularly Spain, Portugal, that are those real growth areas. Hearing of a lot of groups and events coming to those cities. And I think that's really going to be the hotspot for the next year.
And very much lastly, what's the most you've ever spent on a rock and roll show?
Oh my goodness, not much to be fair. I saw a kind of small band recently in Crystal Palace called Rufus to Soul. It was probably quite expensive, but the tickets were about only £80.
£80 is cheap now, isn't it? I spent $85 to see Tom Waits in New York. This was 1999, so that was a fortune in those days, but he never ever plays. Legendary, of course. And then when I moved back to United Kingdom in 2013, the next year, Kate Bush played for the first time in 25 years. That was the last time I ever decided I would get that FOMO thing, and I was on my computer and primed, ready to get those tickets, which were expensive, but these are legendary performers that probably never will play again. William Anns, thank you so much for your time. It's really informative. Thank you for listening. This is the CoStar News Hotels Europe, Middle East and Africa podcast, The Upgrade. We're signing out now. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of The Upgrade was recorded at the Hotel Data Conference August 7th, 2025, and was edited by Rachel Dobb.